Welcome to the Sound of Movement podcast, and today we're kicking off a new week talking about athletic development for the whole week. Today's show is about functional movements. Are they good? Are they bad? We're going to give you the scoop. Have you ever done functional movements before? Well, if you haven't, learn about it here.
Greetings. If you're new to the tribe, we got Rich behind the mix. Rad is at the table with me, Yani Burmeister, and we are Unity Gym, experts at turning driven people into athletes. This episode is brought to you by the Unify Movement System, the only online program effectively balancing strength, flexibility, and fitness so you can unleash your inner athlete. Get daily coaching by us, plus an epic foundations prep program, our revolutionary structural balance blueprint to create your ideal program and optimize your performance. As a valued listener, you guys can grab a free month. Use the link in the description. Now, before we get started, I want to send a warm welcome. If you're on the live stream in the UMS Movement Mastermind Facebook group, leave a comment and we'll send you some love back. Remember, anyone can join and interact. And lastly, big shout out to our YouTube athletes catching the replay. Hit that like button, support the channel, and subscribe if you like what you see. Now, today we are joined by Phil White from ADPT Physio. He's our resident physio here and just all-round smart dude. How are you today, Phil?
So well.
So well.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing athletic development this week, and that's what ADPT is. It's athletic development physical therapy. So there you go.
This is your jam.
Yeah, that's what we want.
This is your jam. And we're excited about this one. This is what we call our advanced sort of elevation phase of our content series. We start with the beginner stuff, we move through the intermediate stuff, and now for the next 3 weeks, we're on advanced. This is about like taking your performance to the highest level. So for all of you who have been following, liking, subscribing, giving us those 5-star reviews on the podcast, this is your moment because we're going to take you above and beyond. So today we're talking about functional movements, and this is a controversial topic.
Yeah, it sure is. It's it's funny to even talk about it because we've been personal trainers now for almost 17 years, Yanni and I, and there was a time when functional movements and functional training was like the real buzz thing. And I remember thinking, what is it? How do I get in on it? And I went down the rabbit hole a bit. I did several years of where that was the kind of training that I did. Had some friends that were quite into it, and so we've tried it. We've been there. We've done that.
So let's talk first of all about what we call functional, and then let's talk about what we hate about functional. Okay, we have our. Can
I just say quickly before you do this? Do you remember when people used to come to Unity Gym and say, "Do you guys do functional training here?"
Training, that's exactly right.
Dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Exclusively.
There's nothing functional here.
Yeah. Look, we have our 15 movements that we build our program around. What do we call them, Phil? Fundamental movements. Yeah. Oh, man, I have a problem with
3
that
times
word.
today.
I have a problem with the word fundamental. I just can't seem to remember it. We have 15 fundamental movements with the UMS program, and those movements are the fundamental movements because they are what we test for every testing phase, which happens every 6 weeks here in the UMS. And then we use those fundamental movement patterns to build your program and to customize your program to sort of keep your body moving in a direction where you're developing strength, flexibility, and fitness, but your best balanced body at the same time as well. Now, that blueprint is sort of different for everybody because you have different genetics, you have different athletic experiences, you have different injury history, and all of those different things can sort of change what you need, what your body needs, And each of those movements, the reason why they are our fundamental movements is because they all carry over to athletic development and any sport that you do, And we had a bit of a discussion offline about this, when I was doing a workshop many years ago with the late Charles Poliquin. He was very, very specific about this, and he drew the line. We got a lot of research to indicate that things like a bench press carry over to sports where you throw a ball, or he used a shot putter at the Olympics, for example. And but there's basically no evidence to prove that if you hold onto a cable and try and mimic the shot put movement, it has any carryover. And what the reality is that when this functional movement explosion came out, what we found was that, standing one leg on a BOSU doing bicep curls, it only makes you better at standing one-legged on a BOSU doing bicep curls. It has no carryover to any sort of athletic performance or sport. And therefore, it's okay to do them. And I liked what sort of one of my mentors, Tony Bataji, once said, I got no problem with you doing them as long as you're really clear to the person or athlete as to why you're doing it. You're doing it to entertain them. You're not doing it to make them better at their sport.
I remember debating Tony in one of his workshops. A friendly debate, of course, meaning I wanted to know why this was the case. And I was saying, isn't a squat thruster more functional than doing a squat and a shoulder press, because you can do more in less time? You can do the squat and the shoulder press all together. And Tony's answer was really, really good. And this is the beautiful thing about having friends like Tony who have done as much research as he does. He said, that's a really good theory, Rad, but the problem is that your body can only recruit 100 motor units at a time, no matter what the movement that you're doing is. And if those motor units are all being recruited to do the squat and the shoulder press, you're doing sub-maximal effort on both of them, because you can't produce as much strength as you could if you were just doing a shoulder press, and you can't produce as much strength as you could if you were just doing the squat. And so he said, yes, you're right, you'll get more done in less time, but you won't develop the same overall strength as to if you just did squatting for X amount of sets and you just did shoulder pressing for X amount of sets. And that was the moment when I started to think, this functional training isn't as good as what people seem to think it is.
Not sure about that recruiting 100 motor units at a time thing, but I'd like
you haven't
just
heard
that? Look into that.
You haven't heard that before?
No. Anyway, we'll look into that, because it's I don't know, motor units are. Yeah, we won't go into a motor unit discussion here, but anyway, that's chat to.
Yeah, that's.
But I agree that would that principle would still hold true, and if you'd be massively under loading your squat if you're doing an overhead press with that same weight. So
that conversation was well over 10 years ago as well.
Yeah,
so I think the number used, I remember the conversation, but I think the number used was arbitrary. It was just basically saying your body can only recruit a certain amount of muscle motor units, and therefore when you do something that's dispersing them over a much more weird, like more muscles, more movements at the same time, then what gets deployed for each of those sections of the movement, bend your elbow, elevate your shoulder, hold your body up, is spread more thinly. I think I do remember the conversation, but I think that the number was actually arbitrary. It was just used.
Anyway, but the point totally still holds true. And I think the interesting thing that I think we should probably start off with is what is a functional movement, because I think this is where it kind of really that is so much of the discussion is there's kind of that functional movement was kind of all about people going back to sort of trying to find these primal movement patterns that then made you better at something kind of unclear exactly what it was, but and I think that's how a certain subsect of the health world would describe a functional movement. When I think of functional movement, I think okay, what is going to make you better at athletic movements? So I think that definition is quite an important one, and probably where the conversation starts.
And I think that the functional movement probably started, at least in our gym, it was kind of like a push against the assisted machines, because in Fitness First, a massive amount of training was done in machines. And if you
in all gyms,
at least in the big chain gyms that we were at. And I think the functional movement style training was like a push against that. It was like, no, we're not going to use those machines. We're going to do functional movements. And in that respect, I guess there was some weight to it. And I guess in that respect, it had a good reason as to do it.
Just to be clear, in all gyms, it was CrossFit that brought back the notion of free weights.
Yeah, right.
Because if you go back and look at the history of gym training and the Nautilus created the first assisted machine, and then they had the Nautilus circuit, which was, I think, 21 machines that covered the entire body. And it was all designed to be able, because when bodybuilding exploded and training in the gym got really popular, people realized very, very quickly that paying a bodybuilder who knew how to lift weights was extremely expensive to teach people and make sure that they knew how to come into a gym and not hurt themselves and get a good workout done. So Nautilus took off, starting to develop the concept of leverage and replicating what you did with dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells and club bells with a machine that was safe, that didn't need any coaching whatsoever. You could look at a diagram and go, okay, I push that thing or pull that lever or twist there, and it's going to give me that exercise and hit those muscles. And so it was a pull away from, it was to improve asset efficiency, essentially, to make it so that that running a gym was cost effective, Problem was that we didn't really realise that would have an effect negatively on athletic performance and functionality. And that's where I agree with Phil 100%. If we really want to understand the meaning of the word functional movements, it is to simplify something that's going to improve your athletic performance. That's something that you can do outside of the gym. And that's also where the line got really blurred. We confused coming to the gym for getting good at gym. And that's what bodybuilding kind of is. It's like there's no when you train as a bodybuilder, you're not trying to get good at anything outside the gym. You're trying to get good at flexing in the mirror in the gym, And so and then that really helped to blur the lines of why we train as well, And so when functional training came back in and was popularized a decade or so ago, maybe 2 decades ago, it was all about going back to performance and going back to how the body actually performs. But it really got taken. I think it got monetized, and it turned into an a way of entertaining and a way of being different. It became its own purple cow, so to speak. If you understand or have read that book from Seth Godin, it became a point of difference, a way that you could separate yourself, as you said, from the gym machines that we knew really weren't training people to the best way possible. They were more about saving money and making gym okay for everybody, which is cool,
At least in the Fitness First gyms in Sydney in the 2000s, in the mid to late 2000s, there came a point where if you didn't know functional training and you hadn't done any of those Paul Check workshops, you were one of the little dogs in the gym,
Those things that you swung around with the two handles and they carried
No, they were the round plastic.
The Vipers?
Yeah, the Vipers. Yeah.
I think that was kind of like peak functional training, and and I totally agree with Yanni. You sort of like that moving away from gym machines, and I feel like it's just human nature to then take that to every extreme, and we're like so often it's probably what's right for people is somewhere in the middle, but we like to go to extremes, and I think the Vipers was
there's been so many of those things that there was the slam balls as well. You remember those, which is a medicine ball on the end of a rope, and there's all these things you can do with them, and there's been a lot of fad. I mean, even Bosu's, Bosu balls were huge for a while in Fitness First, and I haven't seen one used in probably a decade.
Well, they still get used, but look, all of these things came about because of theories. Theories conceptualized based on this functional movement, the muscle planes theory, where hang on, well, if all of the muscles, the fibers are on angles through the body, then why are we moving forward and backwards and in sagittal planes? We should be moving with muscle planes and all this sort of stuff. But then there was no actual research behind it.
They run in straight lines, we're not crabs.
That's the point. Yeah, they were theories. What did you say?
We run in straight line, we're not crabs.
That's really good.
And it's important to note, if there's a couple of pieces of equipment that have stood the test of time in any gym, it's dumbbells, barbells, and squat racks.
Kettlebells and club bells have been around for a long time too. It's just that how you use them, is different. But this is what happened. CrossFit exploded and repopularized, which was a bloody good thing, free weights and essentially the use of barbells and kettlebells and things like that. That exploded back into mainstream. I think largely due to CrossFit, but then people really latched onto this functional movement and started to conceptualize ways to train that were moving in different muscle planes, and then thought, well, hang on, if we need to move in muscle planes and things like that, then why don't we just hold something and rotate and then all this different fad equipment started to explode. I mean, even for a while, cables were a fad.
Yeah.
Like cables. And, Paul Check came out with a revolutionary program at the time, which was his golf biomechanics program, which essentially was designed and pitched at golf players who were swinging golf clubs, and his theory was that in order to get better at swinging a golf club, you had to swing a golf club in the gym under load, essentially, and say, what's the best way to do that? Well, with the use of a cable, and then they exploded, and I went down that fucking rabbit hole like deep, I climbed all the way in until my head wouldn't fit anymore, it was like I entertained a lot of people for a long time doing it. We didn't get very good results, like in weight loss or muscle gain, and I was lucky at the time that I wasn't training any professional athletes, because I'm sure their coach would have been very disappointed in my.
Yeah, I mean, so if we kind of go into that sort of space of adding resistance to sport-specific movements, it's one of those things that seems like it makes sense. Like, oh yeah, if you want to throw a ball harder, just throw a heavier ball or add cables to it to resist it, or golf swing. But yeah, the thing with skill execution is it's not just that just completely messes up basically your proprioception and your the sort of automatic skill development that happens with motor control and learning. So when you suddenly start to change the resistance, suddenly instead of working in a if you've got now a resistance pulling you backwards, that totally disrupts sort of how gravity affects things, and it basically will just make you worse at the skill, not better. It won't make you more powerful. It will basically it's detrimental. So
yeah, that's exactly right. And so how do we make someone more athletic? And this is something that I really, really went down the rabbit hole of, because when I was boxing, I obviously wanted to learn how to throw a faster and harder punch. And I dug very deep into the research. And even for a 4-year period, I subscribed, maybe 6-year period, I subscribed to the International Journal of Strength and Conditioning, and every month they release a great publication that I never read. But what I did pay extra for was their magazine, where they basically put the top research studies, maybe 12 different studies in that magazine, which was a far easier read, and I read that every month, and one of them happened to be predominantly on the most up-to-date research on training fighters, mixed martial artists, boxers and kickboxers.
I remember that one.
I was really, the whole freaking magazine was highlighted at the end of it, because I used so much of it in my own programming, and I was really, really interested to find out that the way that they found training a fighter was, they used, I could be wrong, it was either a contrast method or a complex method, is what they called, where they would do maximal load for speed power protocol, so not to failure. That's very important. You have to still be moving quickly, a squat, and then they'd, within a few seconds, maybe 30, 40 or 60 seconds, you jump onto a heavy bag and do 4 really powerful kicks on each leg. And what that was doing was it was teaching the central nervous system to develop the strength in the squat, and then how to carry that over into the practical movement. And then you do the same thing with an upper body movement for boxers. You do an incline. They actually recommended a 15 kilo low incline press, because it mimics the incline of a 15 degree, mimics the angle of a punch. And then you do a plyometric explosive movement for the punch, either hitting the bag or throwing a wall ball or doing a plyometric push-up or something like that, And so the movements that you were doing to develop the strength and the speed were the bench press, the squat, the deadlift. It wasn't, you weren't using a cable or a club bell and swinging it and trying to do something like that. And they did it. They put a lot of research into this, And I trained a bunch of athletes, and luckily at that point, I started to get some athletes. I trained a basketball player, and we did some really great work on plyometrics to increase his vertical leap. And he was also a friend of mine, so I was able to really chat to him about it. He said, over that 4-month period that he did the training protocol with me in his off season, when he went back out to train, it was almost embarrassing. He was like, I can't believe I'm playing in this league. He was just ripping shreds over the rest of the people on the court in his agility, in his speed, and in his vertical leap.
Was that Luca?
That was Scotty. Swalwell,
really?
yeah, and he came back and was just blown away by the improvements, and it was much more simple selection of movement than you would think. Obvious stuff. He was doing clean and jerks, snatches, front squats, and then mixed with plyometrics, base jumps, box jumps, jump overs, things like that, and it made a lot of sense when you dive into it, It made a lot of sense. And so, we at this point, we should really bring it back into, why we train in the gym. We train in the gym very, very straightforward. We train in the gym to improve someone's strength, speed, flexibility, or fitness, and increase their load capacity, so that by the time they take the field or the court, they are able to produce better results. We don't train them in the gym to improve their skill on the field. They do that on the field. They do that with their coach with a tennis racket when they're on the tennis court. When I Googled functional movements to get an updated idea of what they're swinging on YouTube right now as a functional movement, one of the first videos that came up was a guy, a coach who'd strapped a band to a tennis racket, and he had his athlete swinging the racket against the resistance of the band, and it almost made me puke. And it was great because it was nothing's changed. There's still idiots out there teaching poor people, unfortunate people, the wrong shit, which makes it really easy for us to be successful.
That dude, functional patterns is.
He dropped off the radar though, didn't he?
Well, I don't know.
Is he still going?
I still see him going, and
really?
He has dropped off the radar, but geez, he was going for it about a year or two ago, wasn't he? You couldn't get away from him on
functional
on social
patterns,
media.
How not to swing a kettlebell.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to point fingers, but we've done it now.
Yeah.
So from a physio standpoint, what do you think about the idea of functional? Like, we've kind of built a decent case that it doesn't carry over to the athletic or sporting field here, but what about injury resilience or injury management? What do you think from a physio standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to, so many people have different ideas about what functional training is, so whether or not it's like a lunge with a twist using a sandbag and whatever. I just feel like with all of that, it just adds this complexity that then just confuses people and gives people the wrong idea about what's going to make them better. They think it's some magical combination of movements and slings, rather than understanding the kind of core basics of low capacity, building resilience and building strength and mobility. And so that's where I think it can certainly be a useful tool, and I'm sure there's lots of physios out there who use it to great effect. But I think that if you're just getting these fundamental movements as we train in the gym here, you're getting a really good structural balance by training all the main core movements that we talk about. Then that just makes so much more sense to me. You can just really confuse people by thinking that they need some wacky combination of twisting and turning and balancing and whatever at the same time, and that just I don't think is very helpful. But certainly if the person needs a level of balance that doesn't maybe come with doing lots of bilateral training in the gym, then with balance it's you got to treat it just like strength training, where you need to progressively overload it, you need to make it more challenging, and so therefore and by adding in dual tasks, so balancing while doing something else is a great way of progressively overloading balance. So that's where I see it. Say if you're working with someone who wants to get really good at slacklining, or they've had ankle injuries where they after injury you generally get pretty poor proprioception when you get damage to an area. So trying to basically overload balance to make up for a lack of intrinsic sort of passive strength in a joint is a really good call. So, getting on a bursa ball and doing your bicep curls or whatever you're doing, that makes sense to me as a advanced progression of balance, but I wouldn't be spending my time doing that as my fundamental training.
Yeah. The best example of misuse of the idea of fundamental exercise or functional training, I think was the explosion of people trying to squat on a fitball. And that was this,
a fitball or a bursa ball or an actual
fitball, man, fitball. And there's a classic photo of a trainer there, going, yeah, you're doing it, and a guy with a 20 kilo barbell with weight plates on it, halfway down a freaking squat on a fitball, and we used to throw that around and it was funny because I do remember the days when everyone was trying to do that. I certainly tried. I actually stacked in front of 2 female clients who used to train together once, trying to demonstrate a squat on a fit ball because they asked me if I could do it. And I was like, yeah, I could. I'm pretty sure I could do it. And I stacked hard, like in front of them. They were both like, oh my God, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm sweet. Yeah.
Oh, mate.
It's flat on my back. And so it's just not, it's not recommended unless it's for a party trick, to show off. Now, it's funny because we do say, a lot in our physio discussions and our injury management and resilience discussions that you have to practice, doing things because even becoming really good at a deadlift doesn't necessarily bulletproof your back from not going into spasm when you pick up a suitcase off the turnstile at the airport, And so there is this notion that you do need to sort of train out.
Movement variability is really important because that's what gets you prepared for basically doing anything like when you need it. But I think, that then people just have, like as humans like to do, we just go too far down a rabbit hole and then just add exclusive, like you go so far down the variability path that you're then not progressively overloading anything. And that's where it becomes really problematic. I think like you're much better off like progressively overloading some, core fundamental movements for people because you just don't have enough time in the day to do all the fundamental movements, which we, is the basis of the Unity Gym program, and then add in all this like, gym stuff. Like I'd much rather be like building up my fundamental movement strength and then going out and exploring different sports and activities where you're adding movement variability in a like fun, enjoyable, like kind of way rather than
and we made a change last year which was a very conscious change. It was 1 to improve asset efficiency, 2 to improve floor space and functionality in the gym, and 3, in the back of my mind I knew that this was going to create some really good movement variability, which was to change from, we used to have all of our weight plates stored on the wall, on those wall mounted weight plate storage things, and then we went to having them stored on the floor, and that meant that people had to bend over and pick their weight plates up and carry them over and stack them on their plate. And that action of bending over and picking up and putting down weight plates is a really, really functional movement.
And the way they're stacked, like each stack is per bar. So you've basically got to go the 2.5s first, and the 5s, then the 10s.
So it's progressively
15,
loading.
So it's progressively loading. It's warming you up.
And warming up your nervous system. So. And it is actually a really important functional movement pattern to be able to bend over and pick something up and rotate to walk off with it, So I just love that in Unity Gym. Even not just the way it's dead set like Mr. Miyagi. So I'm calling it a Mr. Miyagi, where it's like wax on, wax off, and you're like, how does this carry over to why is this useful? Well, hang on, how many people throw their back out picking something up, picking up a child, picking up their suitcase, doing something really benign that you don't think is actually training. And that's what happened to Danielson, He was painting the damn fence, but really he was learning how to block a punch, And you're picking up weight plates, but really you're learning how to kick ass in everyday life.
Love that.
So there you go, guys. You heard it first here, and that's what our whole program's all about. It's about crushing it in the real world, not crushing it in the gym. But if you just want to crush it in the gym, you'll do that too. Big shout out to Craig Jenkins. How are you? And I'd also like to give a special shout out to Dave Clark today. I know he's on the stream. I saw him earlier. Dave Clark did something that we really value, which is reporting some nonsense crap post that someone did in our UMS Movement Mastermind, sharing some religious belief that they had and promoting something. And we're not, we don't judge anyone for being religious and having a church and doing this and doing that, but we keep it very specific in that group, very specific to training, very specific to nutrition, very specific to leveling up one's health. It is not about soliciting and doing all that. And whoever did that did not abide by the code of conduct. So thank you very much, Dave Clark. You're a champion.
And Craig Jenkins, to your question, was I late? Yes, you are late. What are you up to, mate? So we're starting at 11:30 Sydney time every day this week, which is an exciting change for us.
Yep.
Bit of training in the morning before we get our party pump on here before.
We all
I hope
got
you
our
guys can
party
tell.
pump on today, yeah. And now we're jumping over to the online coaching group, UMS Online Coaching. If you're a part of that group, if you're a part of the online coaching tribe, get yourself over there. We're going to be going live in about a minute. But that's all we got time for today. This week we're going to continue on the becoming a better athlete, improving athletic performance. We're going to be talking about variables of progression, movement complexity. We're going to be talking about the role a strength coach has on increasing load capacity. We gave you a little bit of a hint about that today. And we're going to be talking about how we keep it all simple in the UMS Online Coaching program to get optimal results.
Tomorrow we've got Nilesh Murty, my business partner for ADPT Physio. On the show tomorrow. Exciting. So he's got more experience than anyone here working with professional athletes. 10 years in professional AFL, and I think it'd be a great chat with him talking about physio-specific questions, but related to athletic development.
And we're finally going to have someone in the fourth chair on a weekly basis. So we'll see you all over there on the other group, guys. For everyone else, thank you very much for joining us today. Great discussion. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Rad. Thank you, Richie. Let's go. See you tomorrow. Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, it's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that
It's
far.
the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.